Hello Internet, in this video I'm going to be painting the little balls of fat and teeth known as the Nurglings, and I'm going to be doing it in a speed painting fashion so we can get them on the table as quickly as possible. Where any Nurgle army marches, the battlefield is sure to be littered with the lesser demons known as the Nurglings. Grown in the bellies of the great unclean ones, these pudgy little creatures waddle into war, causing all kinds of mischief. So now it's time for me to add some to my army and get them on the tabletop, with a notable difference. According to Warhammer lore and Games Workshop box art, the Nurglings are usually sickly shades of green, and whilst this is appropriate for a plague-ridden army, I want mine to have a bit more variety. As such, I'm going to be showing you how I paint my Technicolor Nurglings. The first step to painting these guys is to lay a foundation for the colour to be applied on top of. My aim for painting these is to keep the highlighting and shading simple, so I can get these Nurglings painted super quick. To do this, I'll be using a bunch of shades and contrast paints. But before we start touching any of these more vibrant pigments, I'm going to be base coating my models in dark sea blue, so that the shadows all match. This will make them seem as if they exist in the same world. You can just do this in black. I'm only doing this colour to unify it across my army. Once you have laid down your base coat, we can start dry brushing to introduce some volumes. The purpose of this is to create highlights and such that will go under our transparent paints, and this is so that we don't have to put in loads of extra work highlighting them later. I start with a dry brush layer of Rakarth flesh all over the models. Then, using a strictly downwards motion, I dry brush on pallid witch flesh. By only doing it in a downwards motion, I ensure the paint only catches the highest areas, therefore mimicking natural light placement. I then do a final dry brush layer of pure white paint on the highest points to make the higher areas even brighter. Now we should have something that clearly shows all the shapes that form the Nurglings. It should also indicate the areas that would catch the most light. This is an excellent undercoat for applying contrast paints, and that is exactly what I'm going to do next. For this next step, you can use whatever contrast paints you wish. I have chosen to go for a mix of fairly vibrant colours. One by one, I cover the swollen bodies of these Nurglings in different contrast paints. I try to keep this as random as possible. However, I do make sure that when applying the paint, I keep a Nurgling unpainted in between each painted one. The reason for this is due to how liquidy the contrast paints are. If they come into contact with each other, they will flow and mix on the model, creating muddy messes. So by leaving an unpainted area between each Nurgling, I ensure that the contrast paint sticks to the individual model. Once dry, I can paint the unpainted ones in between, knowing that the paint won't run away unexpectedly. On a couple of the Nurglings, I opt to use a wash rather than a contrast, as it gives the effect of a dirty pale skin rather than a vibrant one. Once dry, to keep things quick, I choose not to push any of the skin with highlights, but instead move on to the details. Much like all other Nurgle demons, these models are covered in open sores, pussy spots, and sharp horns and teeth. For these areas, I stick to the same methods I have used on my plague bearers and plague drones. I start by coating all the open wounds with pink horror and all the pustules with Jacaro orange. I wash the areas with Carroburg crimson and Seraphim sepia. Having these washes slightly tint the surrounding skin can supply a nice effect, making the skin look quite sickly and sore. Once the wash is dry, I highlight any entrails that hang out of the body with Screamer Pink and the pustules with Towelite Ochre. As a final highlight for the pussy spots, I use a bone colour and apply a small dot on the most exposed areas. The horns and teeth are base coated in XV88, mainly because I never use this paint and want to give it a go. Then they're highlighted with a simple bone colour. When painting the horns, I try to wet blend the bone colour in XV88 to create a smooth transition. I don't bother on the teeth though, as this is far too small an area. Lastly, I slap a couple shades of purple on their flailing tongues and call it a day. Painting the Nurglings in this way was always meant to get them on the table quickly, whilst using a variation of colours to make them more interesting. I am fairly happy with how they have turned out, and hope that you find this useful when painting your own Nurglings. So this is officially the last video from the Start Collecting Nurgle Demons box set, which means it's also the end of New Year, New Army. So what's next for the channel? Well, Games Workshop use New Year, New Army as a launching point to get people interested and involved in the Armies on Parade event later in the year. I think this year I'm actually going to be taking part, which is quite exciting as I've always loved looking at these articles on Warhammer community and stuff when that time of year rolls around. And to help with your progress towards Army on Parade, Games Workshop kindly gave me a little pamphletty thingy, which is a tick list of models that you should try and include. And the next milestone is Superior Command. So who better to add to the Nurgle army than the Great Unclean One? If you would like to see more videos on my journey into the Garden of Nurgle amongst other painting videos, then please make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and maybe share it with your nerdy friends, because that really does help a lot. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.